like anywhere to leave like a post or anything for?
No, you have to
like
put it in the post.
a message or anything.
No,
you have?
If you've got a letter.
They don't have a post box or anything.
No, we don't. No, you'll have to send it in the post because things have to go and get scanned through Royal Mail.
Is there anyone who can pass a message to Keir Starmer for me?
You'll just have to email him.
Yeah. Does he have an email address?
I imagine it's on the government website.
That's a shame. I came down here to tell him he was a cunt, but so I've got to email. Would that be breaking law, though? Wouldn't that be the Malicious Communications Act?
What you put in the email, doesn't it?
If I emailed "you're a cunt," would that?
Yes, it would be malicious.
Would it? Would I get arrested for that?
Potentially.
Right. So I can't email. That's a shame. So, but a letter's okay. Can I send it in a letter?
Again, it's communication.
Is it? So how do I say it? I have to say it physically then. Is that the only way I can call him a cunt? Is by?
Well, then that becomes a public order act.
So I can't say, okay, right. I just want to understand what the rules are. But thank you for that then. So it is now against the law in the UK to call Keir Starmer a cunt. Freedom of speech in this country, there is no such thing. You get malicious communications if you write it in a letter that someone's a cunt. And if you call someone a cunt, it's a public order offence. So basically, what he's just said is that the word cunt is now illegal. That's a shame. I really, really wanted that message to get through to him. I'm going to have to send an email.
Before Sister Keir Starmer was the embattled leader of a Labour Party drifting toward technocratic centrism, he was a young barrister climbing the ranks of Britain's legal elite. And this may be one of the reasons why the man so harshly criticised the current British Prime Minister.
That are raised, and whether they're true or not, or whether they're capable of being proved. But perhaps more fundamentally, freedom of speech. The imbalance in the libel laws between those that have money and those that don't creates a real risk that criticism will be stifled, purely and simply because those without money cannot afford to stand up and try to prove what they say is true. Firstly, it puts some emphasis on the need for McDonald's to... That was bound to happen at some stage, wasn't it? Hello? The inside view on the trial in the legal profession is that this case shows the absurdity of the libel laws. What I could say is I think this case would have cost over £1 million in fees, and an ordinary case would be at least 50,000. If you have the money, you can hire a good legal team, and you can hope for victory. If you have no money, you can't hire a legal team, and you run huge risks. It's actually a really important point, and I want to make... Can I say that the absurdity is that it's assumed their reputation is lowered when there's been nothing to suggest that they've lost the sale of even one hamburger. The argument that local authorities don't need to protect their reputation and that the free speech of the public is far more important applies equally to multinationals. So there. I mean, what's tended to happen is everybody said, oh, yes, yes, I'll help. And then, of course, when it comes to the day when they need it, then they're never there.
So what have you gained personally from...
How the hell am I supposed to say to that? I mean, my prediction is McDonald's will win probably about 3/4, but there will be some significant points on which Dave and Helen...
Before Sir Keir Starmer was the embattled leader of a Labour Party drifting toward technocratic centrism, he was a young barrister climbing the ranks of Britain's legal elite. Those early days, captured in grainy footage and archived court documents, reveal more than just an ambitious lawyer. They offer a window into Starmer's long-standing entanglement with the UK's notoriously skewed libel laws. And it's a story that still matters, especially for anyone concerned with justice, power, and who gets to speak freely in Britain. Libel law in the UK has long been a blunt instrument for the rich and powerful, a legal minefield where the truth is sometimes not enough to protect the speaker. Critics from across the ideological spectrum have highlighted how the threat of a costly libel suit can silence journalists, whistleblowers, and ordinary citizens. At the heart of this problem is a simple, brutal reality. Access to quality legal representation remains a luxury. If you're poor, you're effectively voiceless. This is where Starmer's past intersects with the present crisis. In his early legal career, Starmer earned a name as a deft human rights lawyer, but not without participating in the very system that enabled the wealthy to muzzle criticism. As a young Q, he worked on cases that, by design or by consequence, upheld the imbalance. Now, as Labour leader, his reluctance to champion sweeping libel reform is raising eyebrows, especially among free speech advocates who once hoped his legal background would drive meaningful change. The fundamental issue is this: Britain's libel laws do not level the playing field. They entrench hierarchy. Defendants face astronomical legal costs, even when telling the truth. Wealthy plaintiffs can sustain drawn-out legal battles that drain their opponents financially and emotionally. In most cases, winning becomes less about being right and more about being rich enough to endure. Take, for example, the case of investigative journalists facing oligarch-backed lawsuits, or small community newspapers slapped with libel threats over corruption exposes. These aren't just legal battles, they're warnings. Speak up and you'll be crushed. Not because you're wrong, but because you can't afford to be right. And while the Defamation Act 2013 introduced modest reforms, such as a requirement for claimants to prove serious harm, the core imbalance remains. Legal costs continue to be prohibitive. Public interest defenses are still subject to interpretive gymnastics, and the chilling effect on speech, especially online, is real and growing. Keir Starmer, now the man who wants to be Prime Minister, has an opportunity, and arguably a responsibility, to confront this injustice. Yet his silence on the issue suggests discomfort, or perhaps calculation. Championing reform means antagonizing media tycoons, corporate donors, and the very establishment networks Labour under Starmer seems desperate to court. The political cost of change may be too high for a leader more focused on appearing electable than transformative, but the stakes are too high for inaction. Without robust legal aid, libel law continues to be the preserve of the powerful. Without reform, whistleblowers and journalists will keep self-censoring. And without vocal leadership from those like Starmer, who understand the system from the inside, Britain's free speech culture will wither. Not from state censorship, but from legal intimidation dressed in bespoke suits. In a country where public trust in institutions is fraying, and the wealth gap continues to widen, the very idea that only the rich can afford to defend the truth is a national disgrace. If Starmer truly believes in justice, not just legal technicalities, but the principle of fairness, then it's time to stop dodging the hard questions. Because here's the bottom line: when libel law becomes a cudgel for the elite, democracy suffers. And if the Labour Party under Keir Starmer won't fight for the voiceless, then who will?
Mr. Carmack.
I thank the Chancellor's human shield for that answer. But I have to say that the fact that the Chancellor sitting on the Treasury bench wasn't prepared to stand up and answer for herself demonstrates a distinct lack of respect bordering on contempt for her farmers. Will she not meet the farming unions, the banks, the professional organisations, even the supermarkets themselves, to hear why they all think that her calculations are wrong? If the Minister wants to ask her before he stands up, I'm sure we'll all allow him a second or two.
Not the most dignified question from the right honourable gentleman. Mr. Speaker, I, on the Chancellor's behalf, have met numerous organisations about this matter, including those I listed a moment ago, including the right honourable gentleman himself when he came to the Treasury to meet me, and, of course, extensive debates in this place. Mr. Speaker, we may not agree on the way forward, but I don't think anyone can accuse us of not having listened.
In a fiery address to Parliament this week, a Labour MP reignited the long-simmering debate over the future of British industry by calling for the nationalisation of British steel, a move framed as a bold corrective to what she described as years of short-termist policymaking and unchecked market failures. At the heart of the MP's argument lies a simple but urgent proposition. If the United Kingdom is serious about protecting its industrial base, achieving energy security, and ensuring long-term economic resilience, then it must break free from the ideological orthodoxy that has left core national assets at the mercy of private interests and foreign capital. British Steel is not just another business. It is a cornerstone of our industrial sovereignty, the MP declared. And yet, successive governments have watched from the sidelines as short-term thinking, profiteering, and energy market volatility have driven this vital sector to the brink. The intervention comes as British Steel faces renewed uncertainty amid soaring energy prices, international competition, and looming questions about its Chinese ownership. Critics say the government has failed to implement a coherent industrial strategy, instead opting for piecemeal subsidies and last-minute bailouts that do little to address the root causes of the sector's decline. Labour's intervention taps into growing anxiety across working-class communities, particularly in the North and Midlands, where steel remains both an economic lifeline and a symbol of national pride. For many constituents, the fall of British Steel would not just be an industrial loss. It would be a betrayal of the very idea of a self-sufficient, resilient Britain.